baseman because he hurt I think his thumb his senior year in high school, and played some third base. So the Tigers, in their all-knowing ways, saw him as a third baseman, and quickly after drafting him, they corrected that. But Lance was a great player. A great leader, and that's why he's called the Big Wheel. His teammates looked up to him, they respected him, and they listened to him. Because when as a reporter, I didn't talk to Lance that much because he never had that much to say. But when he talked, we listened because what he said was very important. So the Tigers drafted him in 1974, and he was hoping that he grew up in Southern California, as I said, and he thought he was going to be drafted by his hometown team, the Angels. So I'll turn it over to him to tell you why it didn't turn out to be the Angels.
Well, first of all, thank you for having us. Yeah, that story was kind of wild. I've always pleaded ignorance to the point that when I grew up, I didn't really know that much about sports in general. I played them, played football, played basketball, played baseball. And I think really that was an effort on my parents' side to keep me busy and keep me out of trouble. And it turned out after a while, they recognized that I was pretty good athlete, so they kept me involved. And, like Tom mentioned, when I was in high school, I had scouts come to watch me my senior year, which honestly I never saw any of them. They sat up in the stands, hiding with everybody else. And, I had an opportunity to go to college to, number one, play football. I was going to be on a football scholarship with the opportunity to play baseball as well. That was one of the things that was stipulated in the whole visiting campuses process when I was being recruited. And I went on recruiting trips to UCLA, USC, Nebraska, Arizona State, and Cal Berkeley, of all places. Didn't really have much of an interest in going to Cal Berkeley, but the reason that I did go there was because the guy that was recruiting me was probably the nicest guy I've ever met up to that point. He was always at our school. He always had a smile on his face. He was always pumping me up with compliments, and just was always there. In fact, when he wasn't at our school campus, he would send me cards through the mail, which I thought was amazing. And he's just a great guy. So, the interesting thing is I went to Cal Berkeley. Little did I know, I didn't know much about any of the places, but Cal Berkeley's head baseball coach at the time was a guy by the name of Jackie Jensen, who just so happens to be in the Hall of Fame. And the head football coach was a guy by the name of Mike White that ended up over here at the University of Illinois a few years after I went on that recruiting trip. But I wanted to play quarterback in high school, right? In college. I found out later on that the two guys that I would have been competing against had I gone to Cal Berkeley were two guys by the name of Steve Bartkowski and Vince Ferragamo, who were both competing against one another. And eventually, Vince Ferragamo ended up leaving Cal Berkeley and transferred to Nebraska because he couldn't beat out Bartkowski. And I don't think I'd have beat out either one of them, so I'd have been out in the cold. But, back to the baseball thing, I had a workout with the California Angels probably, a month or so before the draft in June. And I thought I did amazing, compliment myself. I thought I had a great workout. I hit the ball well. I hit a bunch of balls out of the ball. In fact, it was at Anaheim Stadium where the Angels play. So, here I am working out in a big league stadium, getting the feel of that. And, you never know at first, am I going to be able to reach the fences here at these big leagues? Well, I hit home runs all over the place. So I was feeling really good about that. I hit the ball well. I threw from the outfield with a couple of other guys that were there working out. And they had us run, which I never was really good at that. I usually come in last place in those deals. But I remember they got me behind home plate because I was catching in high school. And the guy said to me, he had a stopwatch, and he said, look, if you can throw the ball down to second base in under 2 seconds, he goes, you can throw anybody out in the major leagues right now. Well, every throw I made was under 2 seconds. So I thought, I'm in. I'm going to be a California Angel when this draft rolls around. And I was pretty excited about that because I grew up out there. So fast forward to the draft, and on draft day, I was in my last class of the day at our high school, and knock on the door, it was my head baseball coach. And he asked if he could pull me out of class for a second, so I went out in the hallway with him, and he got a big smile on his face and shook my hand. He said, congratulations. He goes, you are the #1 draft pick of the Detroit Tigers. And I was like, Detroit Tigers? You know, to be honest with you, I didn't even know where Detroit was. That just goes to show you how naive I was. I didn't know anything about a whole lot of the teams. The only teams I really knew anything about were the California Angels, the Los Angeles Dodgers, the Pittsburgh Pirates, because my family was from Pittsburgh. My mom was a huge Roberto Clemente fan, and that's the only time I ever got to go see a couple big league games was when the Pirates came to play the Dodgers at Dodger Stadium. But beyond that, my knowledge and experience of it all was pretty limited. So when he told me the Detroit Tigers, I was like, you got to be kidding me, you know? So we got along with that, and then, you know, at the end of the class, I had to go down to the athletic building. And when I went down the athletic building, you know, our athletic director, who was also our head football coach, and a bunch of the other coaches were in, the coach's office, and he came up and shook my hand. Everybody's shaking my hand. So head football coach says to me in front of everybody, so what do you think about getting the opportunity to play for Ralph Houck? And I was just like, who's Ralph Houck? I mean, I didn't even know who Ralph Houck was. You know, obviously he was the manager of the Tigers at the time, and a great Yankee manager prior to that, but I had no idea. So, you know, everybody got a good laugh out of that. And, you know, the day came where the scout, Jack Deutsch, who worked for the Tigers, came to our house to negotiate a contract, okay? So, you know, just to back up one step, I had already signed a letter of intent to go to UCLA to play football and baseball, okay? Dick Vermeil was the head football coach there. They were going to let me play quarterback. They had just brought in a new baseball coach by the name of Gary Adams, who was coming over from UC Irvine, who turned out to be a great baseball coach and had a great career there. But when Jack Deutsch came to my house, I had no agent. My dad was my agent, okay? He came in, and, you know, we said hi, and Jack sat down on the couch, and, you know, we made small talk. And first of all, he had mentioned to us that he wanted me to play third base. The Tigers were interested in me playing third base as a professional. And it was kind of shocking to me, to be honest with you. I mean, I did play some third base my senior year, but only because our third baseman at the time was injured and we didn't have anybody else to play. And I deduced that the only time the Tigers came to see me, I was playing third base when I was, you know, playing games that year. I had pitched, and I was, you know, I could throw hard, and I had a pretty good career as a pitcher. I was a catcher for the most part. I made the varsity when I was a freshman, and I caught from the time I was a freshman till my senior year. So I thought for sure I was either going to be a pitcher or a catcher. And then they came in and they said they wanted me to play third base. So I was like, well, whatever, they know what they're doing. And I was just happy to be able to have the opportunity. But so we talked for a while, and finally he comes out and he goes, okay, the Tigers are prepared to offer you $60,000 to sign, you know, which, you know, I mean, I don't even know if I was 18 yet. My birthday was a few days away, and $60,000 sounded like, you know, $60 million, to be honest with you. But I was so confused in my own mind about what I wanted to do. Was I ready to leave home? Was I more prepared to go right down the road? Because we lived in Southern California, to UCLA and play football. And, you know, it was like back and forth. And it was like the offer was on the table. I couldn't make my mind up. I didn't really know what to do. And I said, well, hey, that's a great offer, and I appreciate it, but I'm just not ready to make a decision, And he goes, I'm just going to tell you right up front, if you're looking to get any more money, that's all the Tigers have to offer. That's all that I've been authorized to offer you. And I said, no, that's not it at all. I don't really know what direction I want to go. I was being honest, to be honest with you. So we're going back and forth, and all of a sudden my dad pipes up, and he goes, hey, Jack, he goes, you mind if Lance and I go in the back room and have a little discussion? And he goes, yeah, go ahead, no problem. So my dad goes, come on. So we go back in the back bedroom, and I walk in, and he closes the door. And as soon as he closed the door, he turned around and looked at me. He goes, $60,000. He goes, you know how much money that is? You know how long it would take me to make that kind of money? And I'm just like, oh, my gosh. I go, hey, I know how much money it is. I go, you're not making this any easier on me. I go, I don't know what I want to do. I'm just being honest. I said, and so we hashed it out back and forth. I don't think he was real happy with the fact that I just didn't say, yeah, I'll take the money and go. So we went back out, and he says, okay, Lance just needs a little bit more time. He's kind of confused as to what he wants to do. And Jack says, okay. And he goes, let me remind you that is all the money that I've been authorized. It's like, hey, no problem. So he says, can you come back in a couple days? And Jack says, yeah, I'll be back in a couple days. So a couple days later, he shows up at the door, same deal. He walks in, sits down. And before a word was said, he goes, okay, the Tigers are prepared to offer you $67,500. And I'm like, oh, my gosh. So this is how negotiations work. All you got to do is hold out, And to be honest with you, I had already made up my mind. I had made the decision that I was going to sign. Baseball was my first love. I just had to get it through my own mind that, it was okay to pull the trigger on that decision and go ahead and go into professional baseball. So I signed my name on the contract. The next night, I was on an airplane on the red eye going from L.A. to Tampa, Florida, to join the Detroit Tigers and start my professional career. So it was kind of a whirlwind deal. My welcome at Fetzer Hall, where the Tigers dormitory for the minor league players down there wasn't the greatest, I will say that. But, things worked out, and I eventually made it to the major league. So it was a good deal.
Well, not only did sports keep Lance out of trouble as a teenager, but so did the wondrous powers of 4-H. As a teenager, he really was a caring teenager, as his mother says, and but he raised a steer by the name of Florence, and in the 4-H club, and his mother even told me that he would sleep next to Florence in the steer. That's what kind of kid he was. Well, but every 4-H kid knows that after you show your steer or your livestock, they get taken away and they get butchered. And, it's a love-hate type of thing because you hate to part with your animal. But unbeknownst to Lance, some good friends of his parents bought Florence. And then they invited him, the parish family, over for dinner one night. And they said, well, what are we going to have? We're going to have steak. And so they were going to eat Florence. And Lance just couldn't do that, right, Lance? Tell the story about what happened when you realized.
Well, the funny thing is now, all these years later, I say, well, I raised a steer, which was a male, obviously, Florence. And everyone, when they say Florence, at the time, the name Florence appealed to me. So even though it was a boy, I named him Florence. So, it was just one of those deals. But so I again, it was my first year in 4-H. I loved animals. I loved, being out in the wild, chasing things down. And a very good friend of mine's family, raised cattle and did all that stuff. And I used to help them out all the time. So they actually went to my parents and asked if it would be all right if I joined the 4-H club that they were a part of. And would we be able to buy him a steer so he could raise it and, take care of it over the summer, show it in the fall at the LA County Fair. And I was like, yeah, so it all worked out. And I was so pumped up. So here we go and buy a calf. And I raised this thing from a calf till it was, 1,000-pound animal, okay? Washed it all the time, brushed it all the time. A halter broke it, I was in the pen with it. Like Tom said, I slept with it on occasion. Well, I walk into the pen and it would lick my arm just like a dog would, So it was like, this was my pet. And then come to find out at the end of the day, when after the fairs, hey, you got to part ways with it. You got to sell it. It's just part of the deal. So I was like, oh my gosh. So honestly, I did not know that my parents' good friends bought this thing. They were kind of the bankers and, involved in that. All I knew is, I was going to leave it at the fair and it was going to be purchased by somebody. And I would, they would let me know if it was purchased or not. So yeah, somebody bought it. We go over to their house and, which we did quite often. And all of a sudden I find out that we're having, steak dinner and, John, the guy that bought him, just happened to, before everybody sat down, you'll never guess, what we're having and who we're having and, making fun of the whole deal. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he goes, well, we're the ones that bought your steer, Florence. And that's what we're having for dinner. And I'm like, oh my God. I go, absolutely not. I go, I will not. And I didn't. Honestly, it was like they were asking me to eat my own dog, my own pet. So I refused to eat it. I mean, that's just one of those crazy stories, but it was like, my first year, and I found out what it was all about. And, there, as much fun as you have during the summer, it all comes to the end at the end of the summer. And it's just the way the whole system works. But, I was in for a rude awakening. So, yeah, it was crazy, but I think, I don't even know what I ended up having, but I did not eat Florence that night.
So Lance is barely 18 years old, and as he said, he went from L.A. to Tampa on the red eye, and then from the toughest part of that trip is getting on a shuttle in Tampa to get out to Lakeland, especially in 1974, because I think I-10 was maybe not complete, and I took that shuttle when I started in 1979, and it took forever. It stopped everywhere. And so he gets into Lakeland, and he's after being up all night, it's his first time away from home, and he's dead tired. And he checks into rickety old Fetzer Hall. The Tigers hadn't yet upgraded it, and there's nobody there to tell him what to do. Only the man behind the counter saying, your room number is such and such. So Lance goes to his room, and again, he doesn't know what to do next. So what did you do next?
I did not sleep the whole night. I mean, I was a nervous wreck. First time I'd been away from home. Like I said, I got on the red eye, left that night, got in Tampa in the morning. And I will say it was kind of a shock to the system when I opened the door to the airport and went outside looking for my shuttle, and I got hit with 100% humidity. It was like, I felt like I just stepped into a sauna. Coming from Southern California where it's a dry heat, going to Tampa, it was like, wow. I mean, what an awakening that was for me. But then I found the shuttle. Like Tom said, it was full of people, and we had to stop for everybody, so it took forever to get to Lakeland. Pull up in front of Fetzer Hall. I walk in. The only guy that's in the whole place is the guy working behind the desk. Told him who I was. He was expecting me. Showed me to my room. I dropped my bags on the floor when he went out, and I was just like, all of a sudden it hit me. I was exhausted, and it was like, well, nobody has told me anything to do, so, and I don't even know if anybody else is here right now, but I'm going to bed. So I jumped in bed, and it seemed like I had just fallen asleep, and bam, 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 I hear somebody banging on my door, and all of a sudden the door flies open. And I look up, and, I don't know who anybody is there, obviously. And for those of you that are Tiger fans from back in the day, does anybody remember the name Hoot Evers? Used to play the outfield for the Tigers at one time, who was a pretty good ball player, and he ended up being the farm director, the guy that ran our minor league system when I was drafted and signed. So it was him that was banging on the door and flung the door open, and I looked up, and he's standing in the doorway, and I'm like, and the one thing I always remember about Hoot, he always had a scowl on his face. He looked like every day was the worst day of his life, So he walked in, and he's, looking at me, and I'm looking at him, and he says, "What the hell are you doing in bed?" And I'm like, "Who are you? What do you mean, what am I doing in bed?" And he goes, so he comes over and he goes, "My name's Hoot Evers. I run this outfit." He goes, "You're supposed to be out, and the rest of your team is out on the field working out." I go, "Well, nobody told me anything." I said, "They told me to come to the room," which I did, and here I am. I said, I've been flying all night. I didn't sleep all night. He says, "Well, I'm going to tell you what. You grab whatever equipment you have, and you head over to the stadium because they're waiting for you, and you have to get fitted for a uniform, and they're going to," he's looking at his watch, and they just started working out 15 minutes ago or whatever. And I'm just like, oh, my gosh. So fire my clothes back on, grab my bag, and off to the stadium I go. And they fitted me for a uniform and gave me some sleeves, undersleeves to wear. And, it's my first day in professional baseball, so I put everything on they gave me. But I will say that these sleeves were, and it's the middle of June, were wool sleeves. Okay? And I got out there, and we had introductions, and because they signed me as the third baseman, first thing after I met everybody was, "Okay, go down to third base, we're going to hit you some ground balls." So like an hour later, they hit me ground balls till I was like, my arm was getting sore from throwing the ball to first base. I was soaking wet from sweating the whole time. And then I had to take batting practice. And, it was just a nightmare start for me. I just, I'm down at third base after, I felt like I had been there for more than an hour fielding ground balls. And I was thinking to myself, I definitely made the wrong decision. I should have went to UCLA. This isn't happening. So, but as it turned out, I got through the first day. It was a extended spring training. So spring training for us, the draftees of the June draft, and some holdovers from earlier in the spring were scheduled to go to Bristol, Virginia, which was where our rookie season was. So it just so happened that I was on a great team that year. Got through all the initial parts of being introduced to professional baseball. I will say that our minor league manager, Joe Lewis, was worse than Hoot Evers, to be honest with you. If anybody depicted a drill sergeant in the military, it was this guy. And but we had a great team. Mark Fidrich was actually drafted the same year I was, so we played on the same rookie league team. We were the Appalachian League champions out of Bristol, Virginia, our rookie team. We played a 70-game schedule. We had one game rained out that we never made up. So our record was 52-17 on the year, which I think, in looking, now that we have the internet, I can get on the internet, I think we had the best team. We were voted the best team to ever play in the Appalachian League in rookie ball. So got that going for me as well.
Well, anyway, so Lance's minor league career begins, and he advances not because of the Tigers, but despite them, because they really screwed up his early career. They didn't know. They finally switched him from third base to catcher, where he was comfortable. But the big obstacle is that he was a right-handed power hitter, and they tried to turn him into a switch hitter, thinking that he could reach the right field seats at Tiger Stadium. You remember Tiger Stadium had a short porch, but he had never hit left-handed before, and he spent an entire season trying to hit left-handed, and he never did hit a home run. But at the end of the season, he began to get the gist of it, and he was progressing, but they finally ended that. But he goes to Lakeland, he goes to Double A, he goes to Triple A, and finally through Double A, he didn't know if he was ever going to make the major leagues. But at Triple A, everything came together, and by 1977, September of '77, the Tigers called him up, and he became the Tigers' starting catcher. I think you shared the position in '78, and then in '79 he became the starting catcher and an all-star catcher. In fact, I've done some extensive statistical work with it about the Tigers, and he's one of the two greatest catchers in team history who had more than a 5-year impact. The other one, of course, is Bill Freehan. So Bill Freehan and Lance Parrish are the two best catchers in Tiger history. I mean, there have been other great ones. Mickey Cochran had 2 great years in the 30s as a player manager, but he only had the 2 years, and then he got hurt, and then he got sick. And then Pudge Rodriguez, after 2000, had a great 5-year career, but only 5 years for the Tigers. But anyway, he gets to once Lance gets to the majors. The Tigers are a good young team. They show some promise. He loved his manager, Les Moss, and in '79, Les Moss gets replaced by Sparky Anderson. And Lance is okay. I mean, he's not okay with it because Les was a mentor. He was a former catcher himself. They connected, and to this day, Lance will tell you, I would never make it to the major leagues without Les Moss. But he eventually, even though the switch to Sparky didn't hit him correctly or positively when it was done, he came to really admire Sparky, and they got along famously. So in '81 and '82, I think Lance is an all-star. And in '83, he nearly catches a perfect game in Chicago that Milt Wilcox came within 1 out of throwing. He gave up with 2 outs in the 9th. The Tigers have never thrown a perfect game other than Armando Galarraga in 2010. And, of course, that was a play at first base that ruined that bid. But Wilcox came within an out of it. Lance was behind the plate. And Milt, to this day, will tell you, I should have thrown the pitch that Lance called for. Lance will tell Milt that, too. But Milt shook him off. Yeah, Milt shook him off, and the hitter hit a first pitch ground ball up the middle for a base hit. But the real achievement I want to get to, so that's 1983. The Tigers are getting good. In 1984, they begin the season, of course, 35-5. They started that season in Minnesota and won those games. They go to Chicago, Comiskey Park against the White Sox, and they won a Friday night game. And on a Saturday afternoon, I was there, it was a cold Saturday afternoon, Jack Morris throws a no-hitter, and Lance is behind the plate. And so they're all celebrating in the clubhouse afterwards. You know, a no-hitter for Jack Morris. Everybody's happy. The players are celebrating, including Sparky. Sparky's not in his office when his phone rings. And a visiting clubhouse kid, just a kid, picks up the phone, and the man on the other end says, I want to speak to Jack Morris. And he wants to congratulate him. Well, the poor kid doesn't know what Jack looks like. So he comes out and taps Lance on the shoulder and says, there's a phone call for you. So you go in and take the call, Lance, and who was it?
Well, it was Jim Campbell, the president of our ball club. And, I've obviously had a few run-ins with him throughout my career there. But, when I got on the phone, I was kind of surprised that, Jim Campbell would want to talk to me, usually, and rightly so, when somebody throws a no-hitter, everybody wants to talk to the pitcher. The catcher hardly is just, gets brushed off the side most of the time. So here I'm thinking, what a great opportunity for me, what a great thing for me that my general manager would want to congratulate me and would call to do that. So I get on the phone, I'm kind of pumped up. And I get on the phone and say hello, and first thing, I mean, he's so upbeat, and which is rare because he was very rarely upbeat. But he goes, what a great day, what a great game. He goes, the Detroit Tigers are so proud of you. I'm proud of you. Everybody in the state of Michigan is proud of you. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh. I go, well, thank you so much. I go, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you calling. He goes, oh, yeah. He goes, and he's going on and, talking about this and talking about that. And I'm just like grinning from ear to ear. I'm like, I can't believe this guy's actually calling and congratulating me. And then, so he goes on and he goes, yeah, when you struck that last guy out, I about fell off my chair. And I go, wait a minute. When I struck that last guy out, I go, who do you think you're talking to? And he goes, well, who is this? And I said, well, it's Lance. And he says, well, what the hell are you doing on the phone? And I go, the kid came out and tapped me on the shoulder and said, you wanted to talk to me. He goes, well, I don't want to talk to you. He says, I wanted to talk to Jack. But, prior to that, when he was going on and, on and on, one of the things he said was, hey, there's going to be a little something extra for you in your next paycheck for this accomplishment. So, I'm just like, oh, my gosh, does it get any better than this? So then when we went through the whole thing about, well, I don't want to talk to you, I wanted to talk to Jack. So now I'm starting to get upset. It's like he's not even being nice to me. He's like yelling at me on the phone that I got on the phone. So, after, it's like, okay, so he stopped talking, and I go, well, wait a minute. I said, how about that little something extra you were going to put in my, he goes, get off the phone and get Jack on the phone. So, I'm just like, all right, that's it. So I took the phone and I set it down on Sparky's desk, and I walked out and closed the door, and I never did get Jack. So that was, my only way of paying him back. I mean, obviously Jack ended up talking to him, and there was a little something extra for him in his next paycheck because he did confirm that. But, I just kind of got brushed off to the side. But, I know Jack appreciated my efforts, so that was all good.
So that's April of 1984, and the Tigers go on to the Enchanted season and get to the World Series against the San Diego Padres. And it gets to Game 5. The Tigers split in San Diego, and then they won the first two games back. And everybody remembers Game 5 for the great home run that Kirk Gibson hit, after which he celebrates. And unfortunately, it was splashed all over the Detroit Free Press, not over the Detroit. Our photographer didn't get the shot, but or if he did, they played it inside. But anyway, it was a great home run. But what gets forgotten was that was an eighth-inning home run. In the seventh, I believe, Lance hit the home run that stretched the lead to 2 runs. And, he just runs around the bases in his customary way. He doesn't, he's not theatrical. He doesn't pump his arms. And nobody really remembers that home run as much as the Gibson home run. But one Parrish family story I want to tell you is that Lance and his wife Arlene had 2 boys and a girl. His oldest boy, David, was a catcher as well, and he was the first round draft choice of the Yankees later on. And he goes to spring training. By the way, Lance had hit his home run off of Goose Gossage as well, as did Gibson. So David goes to spring training, either in Tampa or Fort Lauderdale. And who's pitching batting practice to David Parrish but Goose Gossage? And he goes, oh, my God, history's repeating itself. I mean, this isn't the World Series. It's spring training, but I'm facing Goose Gossage. And he hits the ball over the fence. And he quickly goes to the phone after batting practice and goes, hey, Dad, I took Goose deep also. And so it's a great family story. But anyway, one team that Tigers had trouble with throughout Lance's career were the Chicago White Sox. and not in a one-loss sort of way, but the White Sox were just nasty. I mean, they had players that complained. They had a manager in Tony La Russa that complained. The Tigers had more fights and more brawls with the White Sox than any other team. So there, one day, and I don't remember what year it was. It might have been '84. It might have been '83. But the Tigers, Carlton Fisk is at the plate for the White Sox. And Glenn Abbott, who didn't last long for the Tigers, a veteran pitcher, and a good one, but he just wasn't a Tiger for a long time. He hits Carlton with a pitch, but it's a curveball. He just hits him on the shoulder. But that starts it all over again. So what happened when Glenn Abbott hit Carlton Fisk?
Well, just to set the tone, like Tom said, we got in more fights with the White Sox, and it was because of Tony La Russa, to be honest with you. Tony La Russa,
a Hall of Fame manager now.
yeah, had a kind of a mantra with his teams that, he let everybody know, if you hit one of ours, we're going to hit two of yours, kind of a thing. So don't be hitting our guys. Well, it just happens sometimes. You can't avoid it. But we always knew if, we hit one of their guys, they were going to retaliate. This particular occasion, I'm thinking we're in the clear because Glenn Abbott hit Carlton Fisk with a curveball. And I'm thinking surely, Tony would know that if we were going to hit Carlton Fisk on purpose, it would not be with a curveball, okay? So Carlton, tries to get out of the way, and it hits him in the, back or in the shoulder or whatever. And you'd have thought somebody shot him, the way he reacted. And I'm just thinking, oh, my gosh, play it up a little more, why don't you? And he's running down to first base like, and I was just thinking, here we go, here we go. So lo and behold, the next time I get up, who was the pitcher? It was Britt Burns, left-handers, and I stand up there and he throws one and drills me right in the ribs. And it's like, okay, I know this
Not a curveball, a fastball.
A fastball. I know this is on purpose. So it's like, and I was kind of upset, but I will say this, I've never charged the mound in my entire career, never. But I was really thinking about it right then and there, and I walked out, I was standing there for a second, and I looked out at him, and I started walking towards him, and Carlton Fisk is catching now, and I just kind of was oblivious to everything around me. But I walked out, and I looked at him, and I said to him, I had to come out there and kick your behind, and I saw his eyes kind of get big, And I said, when I walked out, I said, I had to come out there and kick your butt. But then I looked over at their bench, and I said, but I know he put you up to it, And I was pointing at Tony. And it was almost like Tony was just standing on the top step waiting for something to happen so he could come flying out of the dugout, which he did. He come running out of the dugout, and he's, in my face yapping, blah, blah, blah. And I go, oh, my gosh. I go, we hit him with the curveball. He goes, you think you're any more important to your team than Carlton is for us? And I said, we hit him with a curveball. If we would have been trying to hurt him or, send a message or what, we wouldn't have hit him with a curveball. So, I'm thinking, and he just kept mouthing off to me and saying something. I was getting so mad. And which I will say it takes a little bit to get me going. But I was like, all right, I've had it. And I'm gonna drill this guy, But I look at him, and he's got Carlton Fisk standing next to him, Greg Lazinski on the other side, Ron Kittle, Dave Duncan, who's their pitching coach, who's notorious, an ex-catcher, notorious fighter and all that. And I, kind of briefly scanned the scene, and I go, well, maybe that's not a good idea. But all of a sudden, I hear somebody behind me yelling, and it's Gibby running behind me. And all I hear him yelling was, punch him, So he's egging me on. So, finally I was like, what, I got to get out of here. So I just busted out of the pack, and I just ran down to first base just to get away from all the excitement. And, it eventually calmed down. But that was just, and I'm sure it went on from there. There was a couple times when we were in Chicago where they tried to hit Tram in the head a few times. So, I mean, that, you talk about some battles. We had some big-time battles. Al Cowens.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of you
Yeah,
remember the Al Cowens deal when he got traded to us, and we were playing in Chicago. Ed Farmer was the pitcher for the White Sox, and Al Cowens was batting against him. And I'm standing on deck, okay? So Al Cowens hits a ground ball to shortstop, and he takes like one step to first base. And, you know, Ed Farmer, when he threw the ball was hit the shortstop, so he kind of turned around to watch the shortstop field the ball. Well, Al Cowens started, you know, towards first base, and as soon as Farmer turned around, he made a beeline for the mound. And I'm standing on the on-deck circle like, what's going on? I mean, what did I miss? He ran out to the mound, and I mean just cold-cocked Ed Farmer and dropped him right on the mound. And the whole time I'm standing there like, what happened? What did I miss? So, you know, the shortstop was going to throw the ball. I don't even know if he threw the ball. He saw Ed Farmer Al Cowens charge the mound, and then everybody converged at the mound. So it ended up being a ginormous dog pile on the mound. I ended up on the bottom of the pile, and I had a hold of Ed Farmer, of all people, okay? And I had no intention of doing anything. I was just, trying to keep him away from my guy, which I didn't even know what was going on and why my guy charged the mound. So Tony La Russa's running around, and he sees me, and I've got a, bear grip on Ed Farmer. He goes, "Don't you hurt him?" And I go, "Hurt him?" I go, "I don't even know what's going on," So eventually it all broke up, and I looked down after it was all over, and I had blood on my batting gloves. And then they threw Al Cowens out of the game, okay, and we resumed play, but Ed Farmer's still pitching. And here I just had him in a headlock or whatever for the last 10 minutes, and I had his blood all over my batting gloves. And I get in the batter's box, and I'm thinking, there's no way this guy's not going to drop me right here, right now. But he didn't. He just pitched like nothing had ever happened, and I ended up making it out, I'm sure. But that was just, some of the things in the history of our, chain of events with the Chicago White Sox and Tony La Russa. So back then I was not a fan of Tony La Russa, but I will say we've kind of mended things, and, he's not such a bad guy.
Well, Lance and I saw Tony last summer when Jim Leland was inducted into the Hall of Fame. Jim left the Tiger organization to become Tony's third base coach. So he was coach for the White Sox when a lot of this stuff was going on. But we all of a sudden we're talking. I don't remember who we're talking to in Cooperstown, but Tony's very close to Lance. And I tapped Lance on his shoulder, and I said, "La Russa," and didn't Tony get right back into it?
Oh yeah, let me tell you about it. So he's telling the story about the events that took place at Tiger Stadium with Carlton Fisk getting hit with the curveball and all that, But he's got his own different version of it, which is wrong. I can tell you that.
Well, anyway, so 84 was indeed an enchanted season. 85, the Tigers begin well, but they don't win the pennant. And in 86, Lance has a superb first half of the season, and then hurts his back and misses the second half of the season. But in the first half of the season, he accumulates the kind of stats a catcher would be proud of for the full season. So at the end of the year, in spring training of 86, he and the Tigers talk about a contract extension. But then I don't know if you remember, 86 kind of is known as a collusion year where ownership shuts out players. And they don't, as free agents, they don't want to pay them the type of money that they were eventually getting to. And Lance was a victim of that. And Jim Campbell, who had yelled at him on the phone, but had talked to him about a contract extension in spring training, said that didn't even offer him a dollar raise. And so that began to be a big source of irritation with Lance, as you can understand, because he thought he was worth he was worth more. but the Tigers wouldn't pay him, and back and forth, and Lance eventually says, "I'm tired of this. I'm leaving," and he goes to the Phillies. And unfortunately, he's spent the last 10 years. He never wanted to leave, right? He never wanted to leave the Tigers. He still works for the Tigers. He's officially, I think, a legend, right? Don't they call you an ambassador or something like that? Yeah.
A legend
But anyway,
ambassador.
his whole family just still, he moved back to Detroit. He's managed in their minor league system. He's been a major league coach for the Tigers, and his heart is with the Tigers. But he spends the last 10 years of his career elsewhere, or he would be known even more than he is as a Tiger great. We have more stories to tell, but we just don't have the time to tell them. There's a great story about Jack Morris in Oakland allowing two runners to steal home because he's pitching from a one. Jack was a great pitcher, but he was the most stubborn, headstrong pitcher individual. And it wasn't until much later when he realized that as a player, he was a jerk. I could use stronger language, and it applies. But he was, and he didn't listen to anybody. He certainly didn't listen to writers. And at one point, he told my competition for the Free Press, Jack in '84, stopped talking to the media. And finally, Sparky convinced him to start talking again to the media. And when he did so reluctantly. And he went up to the Free Press and he said, "Okay, I'm talking to you guys again, but there's one guy I can't stand, and that's Tom Gage. And he knows nothing about baseball. He should be covering the shuffleboard." And so I reminded Jack of that later on, and we got a good laugh over it. And I would say that Jack and I are friends now because Jack, like Kirk Gibson, he grew into his intelligence. They were both very difficult as young athletes, and just hard to get along with. But Jack later realized that he had been a jerk, and he started apologizing to people. And I had dinner with a former umpire in Florida just recently, and he tells a story about how Jack called him in retirement, apologizing for anything that he did to offend him during his playing career. So that's how these players can change. They're competitive, headstrong, talented, and spoiled athletes early, and if they're smart, as many of them are, they eventually see that's not the way to go in later years. But anyway, those are our stories. There are many in the book. It's been a delight to talk to you. It's been a delight to partner with Lance on this project, and I'll turn it back over to Mother Maureen.
Let's give both of them a big round of applause. I'm sure for as many stories are in the book, there are as many people in this room who have wonderful stories. If they're from Detroit, and we're here in the 80s, wonderful stories of all the good and the joy that you brought to our community. We're very grateful that you could spend this time with us this morning.
Enjoyed every minute, almost every minute.
Well, it seems like you had a lot of minutes to enjoy, and that was such a blessing in your life. So we're not done, because they have a pile of books that if you would like to purchase one and have the book signed, we've got pens over here for you to do that. And if you want to share a moment of a memory with them, I imagine there's a little time, and a little time even for some more stories around the table. So again, thank you. I'm sorry Father Drew was not with us. He's down in Florida with his son playing ball.
Oh, is he?
He is. But
For them.
no, this is, it was his idea entirely to bring you here, and I'm really grateful that we did. So anyway, yeah, he's watching. I'm sure he's watching. So, if you'd like to purchase a book or just come up and say thank you or hello, now is the time to do so.
I'll I'll add to that, not only are we signing books and talking baseball, Lance will also, if you want a photo with Lance, he's very amenable to that too. Yeah.
I'm fine with